Juno's hero trial has come and gone, and I think the general sentiment about her is that we're all pretty positive, but we don't exactly know where she's going to fit into the meta. What are her really big strengths? What are her really big weaknesses? We can kind of get, but we don't really know how those are going to affect how you're going to play her. So this video is going to be about theory crafting, a lot of ideas about maybe how this character is going to play generally on ladder, what maps are good for her, and what larger competitive team comps she may be able to slide into more effectively, or maybe there aren't any. Maybe she's not the best option for any of the ones we currently have. We'll just have to see. So I figured I would go ahead and I started this video, one, with only some pre-recorded footage, again, because the hero trial is done. There is nothing I can do about that, so I can't really go through the training range and do as much stuff as I would like because it is Tuesday after it's over. So sorry about that. And if you watch my other Juno video, you will see some repeat footage. Don't shoot the messenger. I didn't have much time to record, so sorry, my bad. Anyways, Juno, let's go ahead. We'll start with her general play style. After playing this character for a while, or not a while, like a good couple hours, I think she definitely wants to be away from the team at least a little. Maybe sometimes much deeper, but in general, she's going to want to play like on a medium range away from her team. Why is that? Well, she has great mobility so that she can, and some pretty decent DPS output, so she can be a threat on her own angle. She has great ways to help her teammates. If she's with a flanker or something, she can keep up with them. She can help them. She doesn't have to be directly right next to them either. Again, she can be on kind of like her own spot on the map. Just creates better angles, better space pressure, control, stuff like that. But the reason why she can't play that far from the core, if she is going to be trying to help maximize the benefit that she gives to her team, is that a lot of her abilities are most effective at closer ranges. So her healing has fall off, so if she's too far away, she's not going to be getting her max heal value. Her right click actually locks in on both allies and enemies faster when you're close. And we'll talk about why that's specifically more important for the team. But that is something to consider. And also her ultimate is pretty close range and pretty slow moving. So in order for her team to get the most value out of it, she's going to have to be kind of close to them. And I think with her higher mobility, I think really what the cat and mouse game is going to be is keeping in a good distance, kind of pushing your limits to how far you can go and still be effective, right? You push out of your effective range for your team to get some DPS or something, and then use your mobility to come back into that effective range. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of skill there of min-maxing the distance that you're going to be playing at in relation to your team and the enemy. So that's definitely something to consider. You don't want to always, you probably won't do this very often at all, but going super duper deep into enemy backlines, unless your team really don't need the healing pressure that you provide or even the speed, then you can be very selfish. But we'll talk about some pairings where that might be effective and some where it probably won't be. So basically, what is kind of like the general game plan of this character? Like, what is a good like bread and butter that you can use, basically, just something very consistent. It's kind of just, I'm not thinking I'm opening up a team fight. Obviously you should think, but what is like kind of the regular gameplay flow of this character? Well, I definitely think that right click should be used as early as possible in a team fight. It is not very good in the middle of them. You can't really do much else to help your team while you're holding it and charging it, getting ready. So having it primed and ready to go before the team fight starts, and then using it as soon as people start taking damage or as soon as the enemy runs into you is going to provide the most value right away. It's a good burst at the beginning of the fight. It has really good sustain and for your teammates, basically. And it's a good way to just get the most out of this character without having your APM go down because of it. something that you should also consider with this character is that the healing is actually healing over time. So it's a little bit of burst healing and then some healing over time. So it's great sustain to start fights specifically, but also since it takes some time to deploy, if you know that your team is about to go in, get the rockets ready. Make sure everybody is in your view. The second that they go in and start taking damage, hit the button. They'll get that burst of healing and they'll get the sustain through it. Right? So you don't even really have to time that ability very well yourself. You just have to be like, okay, are we almost ready to go? I'm going to do it just a little bit earlier and then actually activate the ability when it's time to go. I think that's going to be really effective. And then from there, you can choose to keep going deeper onto the enemy. You can continue. You can either just kind of heal, play it on a softer angle, or do all that speed boost stuff. Lots of options from there. You could also do this more for your for damage, DPS pressure. I think that's going to be much harder for Space Ranger because one, she has to get in, which isn't that bad, but also it's just not great DPS pressure. And it does, again, take some time to launch up, and it's much more likely that somebody will see you and shut you down, and you'll have to leave earlier. So I would say that using it selfishly, or not selfishly, using it for your team more often, probably the better way to do it. So I also think with this character that ability is pretty strong, and it's a good way to give some sustain to your team. But you definitely don't need to heal bot on this character. You can see here, her magazine is 180 rounds, and it's only 12 per burst. So you're going to be able to get a lot of shots off. I'm not doing the actual math. I'm going to say it's 15. I'm pretty sure it's 15. You're going to get 15 shots off where you can do damage or healing. That is a lot, and it takes a long time. It's over a long period of time, and her reload is pretty short at the end of the day, too, for how big her clip is. So I think you really don't need to prioritize healing that much, depending on the comp that you have. But for most comps, I think that doing damage, letting your healing over time kind of do some of the work, and then healing as needed, like somebody who starts getting really low or starts taking a duel, and they're going to require some resources, then you can help them. But otherwise, I think the DPS pressure is really good to keep up, helps you build your ult better, helps you just create more space for your team, all of that good stuff. So I would definitely say that make sure you are prioritizing getting some damage in between everything, okay? Let me see what else here. The speed ring, same thing. You don't necessarily have to use this only ever for your team. Don't be afraid to use this selfishly, right? And if you do, and you think you still want to give it to your team, throw it at them, right? So if you're off on your own little angle and somebody comes at you and you think speed is going to be the best way to get out, why not just quickly flick over to where your team is so that the ring gets much closer to them? Potentially, they'll be able to use it. You also may be able to use it to escape better. Basically, make sure you're conscious about where you're actually placing the ring. If you're using it for yourself, you can still sometimes get value for your team and for yourself, even if that is not the intended goal of what you're doing it for. So when you're in ranked, try to consider who else or what other circumstances you may be able to use the speed value from the ring when you're using it for yourself. Also here, I have written down, when you're taking duels, you want to pretend like you're Diet Tracer. Now, what do I mean by that? So basically, when you play Tracer, there's this kind of thing where basically when you're taking a duel, the blinks are your survivability, right? So when somebody looks at you, you start shooting them, right? You sneak up on them, somebody shoots at you, you blink. Now you've disoriented them and they have to try and find you again. That's your time to do damage, and then they have to take a second to turn around and find you. Once they have done that, that's when you blink again, right? That's kind of how you play Tracer. She has a lot of high DPS, so she is able to effectively deal people, especially when she has all of her resources up. With Space Ranger, she really does have 3 different mobility options that you can kind of use in very similar ways to how Tracer works, right? So what you can do is that you can start shooting them. If they look at you, you can use one of your speed abilities as they're trying to find you. But right before they're about to use another ability, once they found you, you can maybe jump over it, right? Once they figured out what you've done there, then you can use your speed ring and then get out of the fight, right? So you've distracted them a lot, and you've used your survivability to get a lot of damage in. Maybe you've even killed them. Her damage isn't that great, but it's still possible, right? Depending on who you're actually using it for, right? So that's kind of like how I think that if you're going to be using this character aggressively as a duelist, that's gonna kind of be how you're gonna want to think about it. And of course, play cover and all of that general stuff. Also I said, use the environment to your advantage with your double jump. This character at first doesn't seem like she can get very vertical, but I will say that being able to float around with the dash on the same plane will actually open up a lot of extra movement options of places you thought you might not be able to get to. Just like Tracer blinks, there is a little bit of leeway about ledges and corners. You're kind of able to like float up the side of ledges that you kind of more consistently hit them. So basically what you can use is combine dash with just anywhere in the general vicinity of where you're going to double jump. And then you'll be able to get up to higher places more often. And then from there, you can use another double jump, and you'll have a really good view of the map. So don't think that this character is just only, limited by her vertical mobility, because I think it is much better than people give it credit for. You just kind of have to burn that dash cooldown sometimes. And it's map dependent. Places I'm thinking right now are like on King's Row, you can easily jump off of the payload and then up onto that high ground area, and you'll barely sometimes not make it. You use that dash, you could even go all the way to that second high ground, and then that could be your space, right? And if you get pushed, you can use your speed ring, stuff like that, right? I think a little more outside of the box about how you climb up different places, because you'll notice some random weird spots on the sides of walls, like those boxes right that I'm looking at right here in this footage. Like I could just double jump on those and get up there instead as fast as possible. Just general stuff like that. There's lots of tiny little places and maps here and there that are great. Oh, look at that. I tried to double jump and it didn't work from that fountain, but I could have dashed up there. Just general stuff like that. I think that is going to be a lot of her playstyle. It's going to be about min-maxing your aggression in your defense and also your position, right? That is going to be a lot of it. So speaking of maps like that, what are going to be good maps for Space Ranger, right? Because I don't think everything is great for her, but she does have probably a pretty decent spread of maps. Just like Lucio, fast characters are generally pretty good. Lucio in particular wants walls, but anywhere that you can get around, be slippery, in and out, all of that, that is going to be really good for Juno here. Let me go ahead. There you go. Take this King's Row game. So, basically, I think the best maps for Juno are going to be like maps with good protected off angles, but the main angles are not going to be very tight. So here, King's Row is a bad example of this, because there are lots of weird little nooks and crannies in King's Row, which would be great for Space Ranger, but the angles that you can get off of them are really not that great. I think Space Ranger wants to have a decent amount of range between her and her target, just because her survivability is not really a get out of jail free card. It's more of just like moving faster. So if she's too close to them, her speed might not be a factor enough to keep her alive. Also, just with the general, how the pistol works, especially with also her right click, you want to be able to see the most people at one time to get the most value out of it, at least in theory. So a lot of these tighter angles on King's Row are going to be really rough for Space Ranger to get a lot of real value other than just pure distraction, right? Some maps that I think this is probably going to be pretty good on. Think about maybe like Rialto first. There's really deep angles you can get decently safe to look over the entire point. That's probably going to be pretty good. Rialto third, you can kind of fly in and out of the left side you can watch the big long angles, stuff like that. Also pretty good. New Junk City, I think the maps are pretty open once you get to the points, but those little flanks and areas off to the side are pretty well protected. It sounds like a really good spot for Space Ranger, in my opinion. In this video, by the way, this map, you are going to watch me get annihilated by this Doomfist. He is basically checking my aggression every single time I'm doing it. And since King's Row is very inside and I don't have a lot of vertical mobility to work with, he is punishing that a lot. I'm not able to like jump over his punches very effectively. So that's kind of another thing about King's Row, is that a lot of the places where you would want to be playing don't have a lot of great escape options for you if you're caught like that, right? I also say like other options here, like Midtown might work. It's open angles, but there's definitely some ways you can get around. You may not be able to do it all by yourself all the time, but there's definitely some theory there, in my opinion. Also, just generally maps with good high ground control. I mean, this is a character that is probably going to work decently well in Dive, as well as Brawl. So definitely look out for, good high ground control, good vertical escape option. Still looking for those more open angles, not too wide, but pretty good open mid-range angles. Think about like Dorado, think about like Ilios, stuff like that, where she can really abuse, like one of her weaknesses is her verticality, and just already being set up on that vertical position, going to be super good for her. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're playing this character. Now, I will say she's going to struggle on both flat and tight maps, again, kind of like King's Row. The prime example I have here is Oasis University. If you guys try to bunker on point in Nepal Village, going to be a very similar issue where she just really can't take a good angle. She doesn't have a great sight line to work with. Yes, she is a speed character, but she is not an aura speed like Lucio. She's still single target. Just not going to be nearly as effective. If she tries to take an angle, it's going to be checked really easily. It's going to be hard to escape. She's going to be using her mobility much more for defense and not going to get as much aggression out of it in the end of the day. Also, she's going to struggle on those super long open range maps where the cover is very limited. Junkertown, Circuit Royale, just going to be really difficult for her, especially against snipers and stuff, anything with a little bit more range. Again, her DPS pressure isn't great. She doesn't have any good out of jail free options. If she's caught with her pants down in the open, she's probably dead. So definitely be careful when you're playing her on those types of maps. You're going to have to play much more reserved. Defenses are probably much better, especially on like a Junkertown. I think first is really bad, but the other 2 points, there's probably some merit there. But on Circuit, I would probably avoid her for the most part. But yeah, that is general map stuff. You can kind of use a lot of that on ladder. Just whenever you pick this character randomly, you don't even think about who the rest of the people on your team are. But let's talk about team comps. Let's talk about pairings and general competitive professional play. Like how is this character going to play in that environment, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking generally probably Dive, Brawl. I'm not sure exactly where she'll be the best. In my opinion, I'm seeing Dive more in my head, but there's a world where I think she might just work with Brawl. Obviously, Speed Boost is Lucio's thing. It works really well with Brawl. But I can see Juno playing much more aggressively on an angle, helping her I say much more aggressively. She's playing semi-aggressively, helping her divers play much more aggressively while she plays that mid-range, helping out maybe like a backline Ana to escape when she needs it with the speed ring or something like that, right? I can see that being an idea on certain maps. Don't know how good that actually would be. We'd have to test that and try it out, but definitely something to think about there. So in my mind, I can definitely see the dive angle with her, especially with her mobility and DPS output. She can really help out flankers. She can play that soft angle and help divers who are really far in there, and also help her backline or her front line if she really needs to. It's a great, I think she can go deep, but for the most part, think she's probably going to be mid-range or mid-position rather. She does provide some burst of her own. And yet another angle for the team. I talked about that. That's why I'm saying more like dive. To me, that is divey fundamentals more so than brawl. But again, who knows? Also, like there's probably an argument for some poke comps. I wouldn't say necessarily like spam with like a Sigma or like really long range stuff like that. But, maybe with like a slower ball comp, even just like, Roadhog. Not to say that's going to be very professionally viable, but digging into like the minor details of team comps, I could definitely see Space Ranger kind of fitting in there as well, right? All right, so a couple of pairings that I think are probably pretty good. Right away, just off the top of my head, even in Brawl or Dive, I think Space Ranger or Juno and Kiri, probably very good. Juno can play for the speed, be kind of like a Lucio substitute, while Kiri always does her thing, helps the tank stay alive with Suzu, and Juno can be more of like the DPS helper like Lucio is. Definitely probably slots in very well. Maybe on maps where, I don't know, Lucio's also pretty divey and vertical as well, so it doesn't really make as much sense. So the thing is more of like, I'm not sure why you would play Juno over Lucio. That's kind of what I've been like trying to figure out. It's like, are there any situations where you have the exact same comp and you would play Juno over a Lucio, right? You play like Juno Kiriko. I think the sustain like Malgus and Queen comps definitely do want that aura healing that Lucio provides. I think that, something like a slower Sigma or a Reinhardt brawl like that, you would typically have a BAP. Juno, I don't know if she necessarily slots in. I don't think she's defensive enough. I don't think, like Lucio knockback provides a lot more in that regard. So I would say like maybe just playing like a Winston, like a very fast Winston or Doomfist type of dive style. That might be where her niche is. Over Lucio. I'm not sure exactly, but maybe the Lucio utility is not needed in that comp, so you can greed more consistent damage and healing. Again, I'm not sure. Just kind of some food for thought. Now, you could also pair her with Lucio and go very fast, right? She becomes the Kiri replacement, maybe even a BAP replacement, stuff like that. You'll never, ever stop the speed, and then you can let Lucio more often than not heal aura while you provide the speed boost, right? So you have a little better sustain while you still have that consistent speed boost. This could definitely work. You do have to be careful. In my mind, I see a Queen comp or a Malga comp working with this, but, no Suzu is definitely a factor to consider. The comp would have to play much, much faster than I think you would typically want to make it more consistent. So in my mind, the Kiri Lucio probably still better for those comps. If you were to play Juno Lucio with a Winston variant, something like that, I could also see that working. Again, Kiri does provide a lot, especially in terms of DPS pressure, so I still think that it's probably still better to run Kiriko versions like that. Definitely hard to see like why pick this character over any of the other really good characters in their niche, right? Kiriko with BAP, I think could definitely work in those slower type of compositions. If you've ever seen like a Diva, Kiri, BAP, any like Kiri BAP composition where Kiriko plays as like another DPS, and BAP just sustains, he survives by himself on pretty defensible positions, like on a Rialto or something like that. I definitely can see that angle happening where Kiriko or Juno really does provide a lot more for those DPS, and can do a lot of the DPS work herself, create another angle, and set up the win con a little better, right? So I definitely see that angle as well. She could even work in like a spam comp like that, where on one of those more open maps, not like a circuit or something, but like Sigma, and then you're able to get more angle pressure where you normally wouldn't be able to. maybe that works. Again, I just don't see why you would take that over like a Ilyari or a Zenyatta, but there is a way there, right? So anywhere where you could potentially play like a BAP Kiri, I think you could play like a BAP Juno. Let me see what else I have here. Again, I said you could play a little bit away from Ana, help your DPS, but keep an eye on her to give her speed if she needs it. I think that could definitely work. Map dependent, where Ana still has enough positional advantage to stay alive. But that could be a really good way to get around a dive, is just give her a speed boost instead of trying to disrupt the dive. Now, not disrupting the dive does allow them to set up. So is it better than a Brig? Again, I don't know. We'd have to test it. Juno is no longer here. I have no way to do that. So it's all theory as well. As terms from some of the other pairings that I didn't really consider very much, I think Juno Zen is probably just not viable. Very closely like Lucio Zen, where it's really hard to work, and it basically doesn't. Even if it is like meta for a little bit, it'll probably get figured out, and that won't actually work very well. Just too vulnerable, too exploitable. The win con is too linear and conditional for those kind of comps. So definitely not the greatest thing ever. Brig doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind, at least in terms of helping the Brig. Now, packs are good for flankers anyways, so you could definitely benefit from that. But Brig would have to be looking for another way to provide anything in that team comp, right? Maybe she's checking an angle, maybe she's protecting a DPS or something, and then Juno is getting more aggressive. Sure. I don't think it's probably going to be the worst pairing in the world. Juno Moira is also potentially like a viable strat where Juno doesn't need to give speed at all or think about the survivability of her other support, so that she can do more of her own thing. But Moira comps, they do like to play very close together for the most part. And Juno, I don't really think wants to do that. It's a little different. Yeah, I don't know. I think that could definitely work. It is just like another brawl. Like she's replacing the Lucio in that comp. But is it really going to be that good when you don't have much utility outside of a much less consistent speed boost than Lucio? I don't think so, right? Probably not going to be as worth it. I will say Juno does have that single target healing, but when you have Lucio Moira, that is a lot of multi-target healing that gives you a little bit of sustain until Moira's out of resource. So you go fast, but you have a bit of sustain while you're taking that engage. Juno could provide that with her boost or with her rockets, but again, not as consistent, probably not as powerful, and the escape options are probably more linear, and the speed again is not as consistent. So I probably would not do that either. With a Lifeweaver, probably same thing with BAP, where Lifeweaver can play, or Lifeweaver can play by himself. He's very survivable. Juno could go and do her own thing. A lot of these are like, they aren't necessarily bad pairings, but it's like, it's not really the pairing that is strong. It's just more of like, Juno doesn't have to worry about the other one at all, so she can just get value with other characters or go get her own value. And that's really more of why I think we're struggling to figure out where this character is really going to fit in relation to everybody else. Ilyari, I don't know if that is enough pressure. Probably not going to work. It's going to be a lot more like Ilyari Lucio, where it's like, what is even the point of this comp? Ilyari wants to go slow. And Juno obviously doesn't want to go slow. So probably not in the cards there. And I'm sure there is a support I'm missing. Mercy. Honestly, there is a world where I think Mercy Juno works. It's probably much more defensible, probably like a Ball, Pharah, something like that, where Mercy focuses on her one. Juno doesn't have to focus on the tank. She can focus on her other DPS. The other tank is just very survivable, like a Ball, like a Doomfist, something like that. I definitely see a world where that is the case. something like those Doomfist, like I think they would play like Mercy Kiri, Tracer, Pharah, you know, in like Overwatch League at one point. It was kind of like a counter brawl on very specific maps. I could definitely see Juno being a good substitute for the Kiriko there, being much more consistent than she is in that very, very niche specific counter pick kind of composition. Which is fun to finally have another character that works with that better, so it might be more effective to play that style. But in this meta, I don't really know. We'll have to see. But that should probably be every support. Maybe I'm missing one. Who knows? You can eat me alive in the comments. But basically, the TLDR with the theory craft here is that I don't know. I really don't know. This character is kind of a mystery. There is a lot to be said about we don't really know where her power level lies. We think it is okay. We don't think it's bad. We don't think it's broken. And does she really get a place then if she is just okay, right? Does she really show any of her peers up in any worthwhile compositions? And that is going to be a really big question. Obviously, when Space Ranger releases, they may have some changes. We don't know about their actual power level right now. Or what it's going to be at launch in about a month. So, you know, take all of this with a grain of salt, but I think her general game plan is definitely not going to change that much, although it may develop. You know, I may be wrong here, and she's going to play much differently. We don't really know for sure. So, with that being said, thank you guys all for watching. What do you think about Juno? Do you think she's good? Do you think she's bad? Do you think she is worthwhile as a Lucio replacement? Do you think that she's not even going to be a Lucio replacement? Do you think she plays somewhere else? Please let me know. Comments below. Also, like and subscribe while you're at it. It does really help me out at the end of the day. This was streamed live at twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays is when I live. It's the best time to talk to me. I like to have a discussion every time I go live. And also, if you have any character ideas, rework ideas, hot takes, if you just want to talk about Overwatch, if you have a Juno hot take in particular, please let me know in my Discord below. I'd love to have you guys. Best way to talk to me directly. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day.